So the entire country is shutting down in an effort to flatten the curve of the coronavirus pandemic. In this video, I want to share my perspective with you on surviving the coronavirus shutdown as a nomad. Well, hey, if we're just meeting, I'm Robert Witham. I'm a longtime lifestyle traveler. In addition to creating videos here on YouTube, I also write books and publish a quarterly travel magazine called Meanderings. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already, so you can be updated whenever I publish new videos about lifestyle travel related content. Don't forget to hit that like button if you haven't done that already as well. That helps a lot. Thanks. Now, I am not an infectious disease expert. Don't pretend to be. Most of us are not, and should not pretend to be. Well, so at some point we have to trust those who are, that they actually know what is going on here, what the best way is to deal with it, to respond to it. So with that understanding, my comments in this video are focused on dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic as a nomad, not about the virus itself. So I'm not really getting into that part of it. We're just talking about, dealing with it as a nomad. Please refer to publications from reputable sources like the CDC or Mayo Clinic if you want a non-governmental source for accurate information about COVID-19. I will also post a link in the description to a video by a physician discussing the importance of managing the spread of this virus. I know there's a lot of confusion about that. To be honest with you, I didn't know what the excitement was all about at first. When it first started showing up, it was in China, half the world away, and I figured when and if it got here, I'd worry about it then. Even when it did get here, it was isolated to a few pockets in like Washington State or New York City, so I wasn't, terribly concerned until it started spreading. Then I started paying a little more attention and got a better understanding of why they're so concerned about trying to manage the spread of this virus and flatten the curve. So let's talk about surviving the coronavirus shutdown as a nomad. Dealing with a nationwide shutdown right now is challenging for everyone. It is stressful and frightening as well. Surviving the coronavirus shutdown as a nomad does involve some unique challenges, though. It's hard for everybody, but there's definitely some unique challenges as a nomad. One of the first things that I think has come up made this challenging to deal with is the mixed messages. Our government officials really have done a terrible job of messaging, particularly during the early stages of this pandemic. And what I mean by that is that the information may have been there if you knew where to look for it, but they really didn't communicate to the general public, to the average citizen, just what was happening, how big of a deal this was, how bad it was likely to get. That just wasn't very clearly communicated. Now, I'm not saying that information wasn't out there anywhere, but it definitely was not widely communicated. So I think there was some bad messaging. There's also a lot of mixed messaging, and that continues right to this day, with people saying diametrically opposed things about this virus and the response to it. This has created a lot of confusion, and it made it difficult for everyone to know what to believe and how to act. As nomads, should we travel or try to stay in place? What services and businesses will be closed that we rely on for essential things? Will campgrounds and state parks be closed or remain open? We need a place to park, right? So there's a lot of things that are of specific interest to nomads, and all this mixed messaging and limited messaging has just added to the stress of and confusion surrounding that. The rapid pace of this thing, the rapid pace of interventions aimed at slowing the spread of COVID-19 makes it difficult to keep up from day to day. As nomads, these rapid developments may each require consideration of how best to adjust our lifestyle. Why is that? Well, because when they're making recommendations or guidelines from different government agencies, they're generally aimed at people who live in a house. And so those of us who live in vehicles and travel long-term, frequently, perpetually, we got to figure out how to adjust that to our own situations. When you're getting new guidelines coming out every day or twice a day, it's hard to figure out and keep up with that and figure out how to adjust it. Food and supply shortages. Man, the food and supply shortages in grocery stores are just ridiculous. This started a couple weeks ago with toilet paper and paper towel shortages. I know I mentioned it before. My friend Gina told me they were running that in Vegas. I went into the Walmart in Pahrump like the day following, and, the paper towels and toilet paper were almost completely gone. Then from there it quickly expanded to include hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies. Now entire aisles in grocery stores are completely empty. Meat, cereal, vegetables, cleaning supplies, paper goods, butane, you know, all kinds of stuff are just gone. I went to one store here yesterday and was only able to buy a few days worth of food. The meat case is empty. Canned meat, you know, like canned beef, tuna fish, that kind of stuff, gone, empty. Canned vegetables, there was only one canned vegetable left on the shelf. That was spinach, and there were literally only a few cans of that. Canned chili, there's only a few cans left, the kind nobody wanted. So, you know, it's just crazy. I've never seen anything like it in my life. My daughter went to the other store in town yesterday, and you know, I showed her a couple pictures I took, and she said the shelves there were also empty. So it's not just the one store. I was going to go check out the other store. And as nomads, many of us are quite limited as to how much food, water, and other essential supplies we're able to carry in our vehicles because of space constraints and weight constraints and that kind of thing. You know, we don't have the luxury of hoarding or even of stockpiling a few weeks' worth of food and water in many cases. So these nationwide shortages, and they are affecting communities across the nation, but not at every store. So some towns are in good shape still, others are not. But these nationwide shortages are presenting a real challenge for nomads who need to rely on restocking food and other supplies 1 to 2 times per week, depending on what they're able to carry. And what about travel? Should we stay or should we go? Well, travel within the U.S. is still possible, but it does create a risk of exposure, particularly if you'll be traveling to or through an area where COVID-19 is spreading. So, you know, if you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of activity and you go travel to or through an area with a lot of activity, you got a far greater chance of being exposed to that virus and potentially contracting it. But it's also worth considering the risk of being on the road when you become sick if you've already been exposed. This thing has an incubation period of 2 to 10 days, I guess, what they're saying, which means you could be sick for more than a week and not feel it or know it. And it's not like you're going to be able to get a test. Anyways, even people who are sick can't get tests a lot of times still. So, you know, if you've been exposed already and you start off on a trip and you get sick, are you going to be able to manage that? How will you manage that, you know, if you suddenly become very ill? I'm currently in Wyoming because I came here to join my daughter and 2 granddaughters on a road trip to upstate New York to visit family. And I want to emphasize upstate New York, not New York City. Very different places. Long ways away. This trip was planned before the coronavirus pandemic took off in the U.S., and at the time we left Wyoming, the official guidelines were still to wash hands frequently and avoid large groups. No big deal, right? You know, standard infection control things, like you do in flu season or something. So not a big deal. The situation developed rapidly while we were traveling, and we actually ended up cutting our trips a little bit short to head back to Wyoming out of concern with the way things were developing. So as we traveled, we pretty much drove straight through. We stopped only for gas and restroom breaks, washed our hands every time we stopped, ate in the vehicle, so our exposure was limited at least by that travel style. We made the trip from Wyoming to upstate New York in 30 hours going out. The trip back took us about 33 hours, a little bit longer because we ran into snow and ice starting in Chamberlain, South Dakota, all the way through to Wyoming. It was off and on. The whole road wasn't terrible, but off and on at points it was pretty bad. It took us a few extra hours to make it back from there. So in other words, as the situation developed, we tried to stay safe and limit our exposure as much as possible. Now, I had originally planned to return to Nevada for the month of April before coming back to Wyoming in early May. Now I am not sure what I'm doing. As nomads, we're accustomed to frequent or even perpetual travel. We also are often camped in locations that require us to move every so often. So, for example, a lot of BLM and Forest Service sites will require you to move a certain distance away every 14 days. So if you're going to stay legal, you got to keep moving every 2 weeks. Anyways, in many cases, other places you may be able to stay even less time. And many nomads are also encountering state parks and campground closures that have forced them to travel. So they were planning on staying somewhere, staying put. They were supplied, stocked up, all ready to go, and then the management or the government agency overseeing the place shut it down, and they had to leave. So that's happening too, and that's something to be to think about if you're planning on traveling. Is that a lot of places are closed or will be closing, so that puts more people into the remaining available places. So it may be more difficult to find places to camp that meet your needs and that are not crowded. You definitely want to avoid crowds right now. So the question of when and where to travel during this pandemic is significant for nomads, as travel is for us is not just about recreation, but a lifestyle. And we often do have to move periodically, whether we want to or not. Okay, self-isolation and quarantine. Self-isolation and social distancing they've become significant for people around the world in an attempt to slow the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Since this virus is spread by contact, or air droplets, by being close, coughing, sneezing, that kind of thing, limiting contact with other people who may be infectious but do not yet know is the number one way to slow the spread of the virus. Those who have been exposed to the virus are being told to self-isolate for 14 days to be sure they have not contracted the virus. This is obviously unpleasant and frustrating for many people, and it introduces a lot of challenges and often financial problems due to interruptions in income and things. As nomads, though, we are both uniquely prepared to self-isolate and uniquely challenged when it comes to that. Many of us are accustomed to boondocking off-grid for days or weeks at a time. That's my norm. A little bit different when I'm here in a town where I'm with my kids right now. Still figuring out, like I said, spring and summer plans, but my norm is to be out boondocking in the desert or in the forest or in a mountain somewhere, and so I'm off there for days at a time. So that's not a big deal. I'm set up to do that, and many of you are as well. Self-isolating may mean camping a little further from friends or limiting close social interactions, like sitting too close around a campfire. You may have to forego the campfire altogether, or you got to be 6 feet apart to stay safe, is what they're saying. So that's kind of maybe it's just two of you can sit 6 feet apart. But you may have to limit some social interactions, but it's not a significant change in turn like it is for a lot of other people. On the other hand, many nomads are not set up to carry 2 weeks worth of food, water, and other essential supplies. So extended self-isolation or quarantine becomes difficult. You just can't carry enough food and water or whatever you need to get through that long. Your vehicle isn't big enough. You don't have enough space to carry that. So that kind of becomes a problem if you are faced with wanting to self-isolate for extended periods of time to avoid exposure, or if you need to because you were exposed, or if you end up actually getting sick, same thing. So that self-isolation or quarantine can be challenging if you aren't able to carry enough supplies. So that's kind of what's going on, some of the ways it affects nomads. Well, here are my takeaways. I got 5 that I want to highlight here. First, anything is possible, including the entire country shutting down in a matter of days. Whoever would have thought this? I mean, this is, we've just never seen anything like this. So, absolutely mind-blowing. So, anything's possible. And I think that's an overarching principle that's worth considering whenever we make plans. Not just during this outbreak, although certainly now, because things have been developing so fast, we really just don't know where this is going to end. But I think it's worth keeping in mind. Not that we have to be paranoid and terrified or anything like that, but it's worth keeping in mind a little bit that stuff happens, and it can get crazy, and all of our plans can be upended. So having a, alternative plan or a backup plan is not a bad idea when we're traveling around. Secondly, a good time to assess your risk. Most people who do contract COVID-19 are experiencing mild to moderate flu-like symptoms, annoying but survivable, and they recover without medical intervention. So older people, like those over 60 especially, and those with pre-existing health problems are more likely to become seriously ill. And this is a big concern for us in the nomad community because many nomads are retirement age, and many also have, those who are a little younger also have medical problems, other medical problems. So that's kind of a concern because I think our population as nomads is going to skew towards the higher risk end of this thing. So if you find yourself in that category, you're over 60, you're have other pre-existing health problems, so if you contract this, you're more likely to become seriously ill. I think first thing is to be extra vigilant about exposure and really try and be careful about not being exposed to this. But also, it's worth considering your proximity to health services in case you need them. You know, where is your local hospital to where you're at? Are you going to be able to get there, you know, if you do become sick? Third, preparedness. Is always a good thing, but this whole thing with the coronavirus shutdown, I think, has really highlighted that for a lot of us. Maintain your vehicle in good condition. You know, you don't know when you're going to have to travel, and you don't know when the whole country might shut down, and it might be difficult to find a mechanic. So maintain your vehicle in good condition, because it's your transportation and your house. You don't want to be running into vehicle problems in the midst of a whole crisis nationally. Also, though, it highlights the importance of carrying enough food, water, and supplies to last, I think, at least 2 weeks, if not longer. And that's something I'm going to be working on, because right now I'm only set up to carry, you know, I can carry about a week's worth of water and you know, about half a week's worth of food normally. So I'm going to be working on that in the coming days, making sure that I get this adjusted so that I'm able to carry more food and water. Speaking of which, I attempted to buy another 7-gallon water jug yesterday, and they're sold out of those. And the 6-gallon ones and the 5-gallon, they're sold out of those as well. So as soon as I can find one, I'll be adding one of those and rearranging some things to be able to carry more food. Another way of being prepared is, even if you use other things like you're used to plugging in, or if you're used to having a generator, having a solar setup is a good way to be prepared, because if you end up in an extended period where you're trying to self-isolate or quarantine or whatever, that's going to keep power coming. You don't have to worry if you have enough gas for your generator. You don't have to worry about having enough gas to run your engine and your vehicle to recharge your batteries. You have electricity. So I think solar is a great preparedness thing, even if you also typically use other things like recharging while you're driving or running a generator or plugging into the grid. It still gives you that much more independence when things get messy like they are right now. Fourth, that is limit non-essential travel temporarily until things settle down. This isn't a law. You can do what you want. But my take is it's worth scaling back on non-essential travel right now. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going back to Nevada. I'm not sure what exactly I am doing this spring and summer. But until things settle down, I am going to limit non-essential travel. And there's a few reasons for that. One is to reduce the risk of exposure. I'm in an area right now that is lagging behind many areas in terms of disease activity, the virus activity. We only have, last I heard, I think it's 22 or 23 confirmed cases here in Wyoming. And of course, it's more than that because they don't have enough tests, but like everywhere. So the numbers everywhere are higher than what you're hearing. But in Wyoming, we have a relatively small number of confirmed cases. So that means a lot of places that want to travel are going to have far more virus spreading going on than what I have right here in Wyoming. So I don't want to go and put myself into a place where I'm more likely to end up sick. But limiting non-essential travel also helps me do my part to avoid spreading the virus. So if I do become sick, even if I'm not really sick, I'm only mildly sick and I don't even know that I have COVID-19, I'm going to be able to spread it to other people. And on average, they're saying each person who gets sick with this disease gives it to 2 or 3 other people. So limiting non-essential travel will help me do my part to make sure I'm not spreading the disease to anyone else. It also saves fuel. And right now, a lot of us are experiencing financial impact because of this shutdown, and even those who are going to be getting some kind of paid time off or unemployment insurance or whatever may still be experiencing a financial impact. So limiting non-essential travel helps to save fuel and wear on the vehicle, which can help the budget at a time when things are a little tighter. My own work has slowed down a little bit because of this mess. So same thing. If I don't have to drive 1,000 miles back to Nevada, that's a good thing. That saves gas and wear on the vehicle. My fifth takeaway, this too shall pass. And I am not in any way downplaying the significance and impact of this pandemic. Not for the people who are sick, not for those who have lost their lives, for those who have lost loved ones to this virus, to those whose financial situation has been devastated by this virus and the shutdown, and that's going to just continue to get worse for a while. So I'm not in any way downplaying anything. But I do think it's still worth remembering that this is temporary. And in a year or two, hopefully sooner, but in a year or two, we'll be looking back on this as history. And, you know, that's worth keeping in mind anytime you're dealing with something big and scary. That this is a temporary situation and it's going to get better eventually. So this too shall pass. Well, enough about me and how I'm dealing with this. What about you? How are you dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and shutdown? What is working or not working for you right now? Let me know in the comments, and maybe we can help each other out with dealing with this pandemic shutdown.